and welcome to Crafts with Ash. My name's Ashley, and today I'm going to bring you 3 really great red, white, and blue patriotic crafts. Now, this is part of an open challenge that is hosted by Theresa B, DIY, and co-hosted by Unicorn Dust Designs. And today is a fundraiser for the Fisher House. And the Fisher House is a home away from home offered at no cost to military and veteran families while their loved one receives specialized care. So as you watch today, you're watching for a great cause. So be sure, if you haven't already, to check out the channel of Theresa B DIY and subscribe to her and Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. They are both amazing crafters and YouTubers, and I can't wait till you see what they have to offer. Also, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, then also hit that little notification bell so you can get notified anytime I upload a new video. Also, find me on Facebook and Instagram and join my crafting community. All right, let's get started with these red, white, and blue DIYs. For my first DIY, I'm going to be using this leftover sign that I had from Easter. And of course, I'm going to pop off the feet. Now keep the feet close by because we will be using those, and that little raffia bow. And then I took off the eyes and cut off the little twine hanger up top. Next, I flipped my sign over, and by using the Dollar Tree spackling, I filled the holes on my sign, and once it dried, I went ahead and sanded it down. After that, I gave this sign a really good coat of white Waverly chalk paint. After my sign was dry, I took a jumbo craft stick that I got in a pack from Walmart, and I drew a line up at the top because we're going to make a hat. Next, I took these star stickers that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just placing them on top where I drew that line. And this is going to be the top of our hat. Once I had all my stars laid out, I took some ocean chalk paint from Waverly and painted on top of the star stickers right where my hat is. Also, I painted that craft stick with that blue chalk paint as well. But before I painted that, I went ahead and cut off the curved ends and then sanded them down. After my stars were dry, I used my little knife to go ahead and peel up each one of the stickers. Next, after my stick was dry, I went ahead and sanded that down, and then I also sanded the top of the hat where the stars are as well. I'm really going for some rustic Americana pieces this year, so you're going to see me make a lot of this look antique. Next, I decided that I wanted to clean up my stars just a little bit, so I took my white paint marker and just colored in any of the stars that got blue paint. After that, I used some hot glue to attach my little brim of my hat down to my sign. Next, I used a pencil and I drew out kind of a V, but it's kind of a curved V, to make a beard. Next, I found where the center was at the little tip of the beard, and I drew a V going down. Now, they're not perfectly even, but that's okay. I didn't really mind. After that, I took that ocean paint again from Waverly, and I painted in between the beard and the V at the bottom, and this is going to be a little vest. We are going to make a little Uncle Sam gnome, so this blue part is going to be the vest. While you watch me paint this, I just want to take this opportunity to welcome you to my page. If you are new here, I hope that you love what you see, and if you are returning, thank you so much for all of your support. I have absolutely loved sharing all of my DIYs and crafts with all of you, and I look forward to sharing more. So thank you so much for joining me. Next, by using a smaller paintbrush, I cleaned up the edges where the beard is. I didn't want it to look perfect because, of course, a beard does not look perfect, but I just want to fill in any of those little edges and the sides that I would have had to use a small brush for, if that makes sense. Once all of my blue paint was dry, I took some painter's tape and, starting at the bottom white section all the way to one side, I went ahead and put a piece of tape long enough to cover the white part going down. Then I cut off a smaller piece of tape just as my spacer, and then I just kind of made lines going through the width of that white section, and these are going to be the gnome's pants. So I did this until the whole thing was covered. I also made sure to put some painter's tape up on the blue part so that way none of the paint got on the blue paint. Once all my tape was down, I used some red acrylic paint to paint over those white stripes. Then, once all of my red paint was dry, I went ahead and peeled off all of the painter's tape. Now, this revealed some red and white striped pants. Then I took my small brush again and I just cleaned up any of the edges where the paint did not touch. So like I said before, I am definitely going for the rustic Americana theme. So to achieve this, I took some Waverly Antique Wax and I dry brushed that all over my sign. I went a little darker in areas and a little lighter, but I definitely made sure to pay attention to the edges, and those were a little darker. After that, to give my gnome a little nose, I hot glued a 20mm bead, and I will have these in the description box below. I got them at Amazon in a big pack, and I just hot glued that underneath the brim. Next, I took one of these foam USA signs, and this did come in a 3 or 4 pack from the Dollar Tree, and I took it off the little plastic stem, I guess, and I brushed over that with the antique wax as well to give that the rustic look. Then instead of putting that plastic holder back on, I went ahead and took a skewer because I just wanted it to, I don't know, I just thought that would look better than the plastic. But before I did that, I took the ribbons off of that so I can use it. Then I painted that skewer with some white paint. After my stick was dry, I went ahead and hot glued the stick onto the back of that USA sign. Then I took those ribbons and tied those around the stick right underneath the word. Next, I positioned the sign at an angle so it looked like the gnome was holding it, and then I went ahead and hot glued it down. After that, I took those two little bunny feet that came off the front of the sign and I sanded down all of the glue that was on the back, and then I gave these a really good coat of the white Waverly chalk paint. After those were dry, I glued them down so it looked like hands holding that little sign. So I made sure to glue them kind of overlapping each other on top of the skewer. Next, I quickly dry brushed over those gloves with the antique wax. That way it tied in with the entire sign. Then, to help all of the wax blend in, I sanded the whole thing down. After that, I cut all of my ribbons at an angle. Now, I did not tie these ribbons in a bow because we are going to add that raffia bow in just a minute. But first, I went ahead and decided that I was going to make the nose a little darker so it stood out more from that white beard. So I just brushed some antique wax over it and then wiped it with my finger and with a paper towel. And here's where I went ahead and hot glued that raffia bow that came from the front onto my sign right underneath the USA. Now I did hit that with the antique Waverly wax as well. That way it all blended in. I loved how this came out. I thought it was super cute, and he is a fun little patriotic gnome. But what do you think? This next DIY is my absolute favorite, and I think you're gonna love it. So I took this little pink truck that I had left over for Easter, and it does have a little sign on the bottom that says Happy Easter, but I went ahead and cut that off. Now I am gonna use that, so keep it close. After that, I went ahead and kind of deconstructed this truck a little bit. I took the little bunny tail off, and then I used a little scraper and my hair dryer to get off the little hubcaps of the tires. Next, I decided that I needed to make the top look like a just even straight rectangle. So I used my ruler and a sharp knife to score it a few times right at the top where the top of the truck is. And then as I scored it, I just kind of bent it and it snapped right off. So it was very simple to do. So I cut the top of the eggs off, and then I also cut the side where you can see that green egg right there is a little curve. So I just cut that off too, so it was a nice rectangle at the top of my truck. Then I sanded down everything I just cut so it was nice and smooth. After that, I flipped over my truck, and by using some red craft paint, I went ahead and painted the bottom portion of this truck. Now, as you can see, I went ahead and I drew a line by using my ruler so I knew where to stop painting it red. And basically, just where the bed of the truck was, I didn't paint it red. But everything else, pretty much, I went ahead and painted. After my red paint was dry, I took the hubcaps. Now you do have to flip them upside down because now they're going to fit in the opposite wheel, if that makes sense. So I traced out where the tire would be, and then by using the cap of my acrylic paint, I drew out the middle part of my tire. So you can see that I'm tracing around with my, just like that, with by using the hubcap. I hope that makes sense. So that way I know where my tire is. And then again, on the other one, I'm just still using my paint marker to trace a smaller circle in the middle. After that, I'm taking a small paintbrush and just some regular black acrylic paint and painting the inside of my tire. Now, I'm not going to paint the inside of the smaller circle, just around it. Now you can still see that there are holes in the tires. If you want, you can use the spackling that we used in the first DIY and fill those holes, but I knew that I was going to prop this up, so it didn't really bother me. And same with the hole up top too, at the top of the truck. I just let the holes be. I don't know, for some reason I just chose not to fill these ones. My tires were painted, I took those hubcaps, and like I said, we have to use the back side of the hubcaps because they are going to fit differently. So I just sanded them down as much as I could. I couldn't really get all of the glue off, but that's okay. I guess it just added to that rustic look. And then I painted each one of the hubcaps with that ocean blue Waverly chalk paint. And I did make sure to get all of the edges of the hubcap around it too. This is your friendly reminder that if you love what you're seeing today, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. That really helps my channel to grow, but it also tells YouTube that you love my content and that you want to see more. So hit that like button if you want to see more of my videos in the future. While I was letting those dry, I took some of my silver metallic paint that I got from the craft section at Walmart, and I painted the inside circles of the wheels. I ended up doing 2 coats. I don't know if I had to do 2 coats because I accidentally got red, like started painting red in there and then stopped, or if you would have to do 2 coats either way, but I just really wanted this to be very covered, like fully covered. After that, I laid out my hubcaps, but before I glued them down, I'm going to work on the bed of the truck. So I took this pack of small craft sticks. Now, I don't know where they came from. My mother-in-law actually gave me a bunch of craft supplies for Mother's Day. So, and this was part of it, but they are the mini craft sticks. I believe the Dollar Tree might have them, but I'm not sure where she got them. But I just went ahead and took my Waverly Antique Wax and a baby wipe, and I stained both of these. Now, when I went to lay these down, I realized that the sticks were shorter than the bed of the truck, the white part. So what I ended up doing was just taking my red paint and extending the red paint and like the red part, and I did have to give that a few coats because, as you can see, because there's white underneath it, it made it like a completely different color. But then to attach this, I actually took another craft stick and cut off 2 little pieces, stained those, and then I hot glued them to the back of the sticks to kind of make a rack for the bed of my truck. After my rack was all put together, I laid it on the truck to see how I liked it, and as I was trying to figure it out, I just ended up hot gluing the hubcaps down on my truck. The reason why this is so choppy and kind of going back and forth is because I really didn't know what I was doing. Like, I sometimes have a vision in my head and sometimes I just go for it, and this was one of those go for it ones. So I don't know, I just kind of created as I went along. So at this point, I just decided to glue those down because I definitely knew that those were going to get glued down there. And then I actually decided that the white part of the bed of the truck, I actually wanted that to be black. So I ended up going over that with some black paint. After my black paint was dry, that's when I went ahead and hot glued my rack down. Now, as you can see, it did come apart, so I just found it easier to hot glue just the 2 little parts down and then hot glue the other sticks going across. Next, I took a pack of the foam glitter filler stars, and I apologize, I forgot to show what it looked like. But what I did was I took some of the smaller ones out and I actually used my knife to cut them in half. That way they would lay better on underneath the rack on the black part of my truck bed. So I took a big red one and then a small white one and a small blue one, and that's how I arranged them in the back of the truck. So I really loved cutting them in half. It was so much easier to glue down and they really stuck really well. So as you can see there, I just went ahead and cut it down because they're 3D, so it would have bumped out. And then I just arranged them how I liked and I overlapped them. And then once I positioned them how I wanted it, I went ahead and hot glued all of my stars down. Next, to give it that rustic look that I love, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and my favorite distressing brush, and I dry brushed this entire truck. Now, I started a little lighter, but then by the time I was done, I just decided that I really wanted it to look distressed. So I went over it a few times and I made it darker. So I would do this, and then I would sand, and then I would distress again, and I would sand until I got it to look how I wanted. Next, I took that sign that we cut off the bottom of the truck and I flipped it over, and by using my Waverly Antique Wax and a baby wipe, I went ahead and stained the top of that board. Next, I took this pack of sticker foam letters that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I took off the white stars and put them in the middle of the silver paint on my tires. After that, I knew that I wanted to use the USA sticker, but it was obviously red and my truck was red, so I just went ahead and painted over the sticker with my white Waverly chalk paint. After that was dry, I went ahead and placed it right in the middle of my truck underneath the window. Then I took my Waverly Antique Wax, and this is where I decided that I really wanted to make it look a lot darker, so I just went so much darker with the Waverly Wax, and I really paid attention to the edges of the truck as well. I also went over the white sticker letters or words, the stars, and the USA. After that, I took that board again, and I took this burlap ribbon that I got from the Dollar Tree, cut off a piece that was long enough to cover the board lengthwise, and then I cut off the edges because I'm going to pull some strings out to give it that frayed look. After that, I hot glued my ribbon down to the front of my board. After that, I repeated this whole process again. That way, my whole board was covered in the burlap. Next, to help my truck stand on top of the board, I took 2 of the tumbling tower blocks, although you might as well just take 4 because I ended up adding 2 more, and I stained them with my antique Waverly Wax. Once those were dry, I hot glued the tumbling tower blocks behind the wheels of my truck. I did make sure to put a generous amount of hot glue on the bottom so it touched the burlap and on the truck itself. And then here's where you can see that I decided to add 2 more on top just for extra support. And this is the way my truck came out. I thought it was super cute and I absolutely love it. What do you think? This last DIY is so easy. So first I started off with a canvas that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I unwrapped the plastic, and then by using a knife, I went ahead and cut off the canvas part from the wood frame. Now you want to make sure to cut on the outside of the staples. Now you are more than welcome to take the staples out. I just didn't really feel it necessary, but if that bugs you, you can definitely take them out. Next, I went ahead and cleaned it up a little bit, sanded it down, and then I took this pack of jumbo popsicle sticks and I laid them out so it covered the frame of the canvas. Now you've seen me probably do this a million times if you followed me for a while, but I love the way that these shiplap signs look, or the faux shiplap, and so that's why I do them a lot. But after I figured out how many I would need to cover the whole frame, I went ahead and measured on where I needed to cut to make them fit the frame, and then I cut them all down. Once they were all cut, I laid them back down again, because before you glue them, you absolutely want to do this, because crazy things can happen and they can shift and they can move, or you can see me kind of switching some around because some of them are bowing. So you definitely want to lay these all out before you start gluing. But then once you get them all laid out and it looks like they're all going to fit, then you can start hot gluing them down. Now the trick to this is that you want to put just a little dab of hot glue at the edge of the frame, so that way not a lot of the hot glue kind of squeezes into the front of your piece. Now, after I was done with this part, I realized that a lot of the sticks were kind of leaning backwards or not even sticking. I don't know what's wrong with this package of the jumbo craft sticks I got, but a lot of them seem to be kind of bent or bowed or curved. But to solve this, I just took another craft stick and I just hot glued it down diagonally. That way they all kind of straightened out and stayed put. Next, I took my Waverly chalk paint in white and I painted this entire thing with that. Now, I also went in to the craft sticks as well, and you're going to see that I kind of jumped to a smaller paintbrush so I can get into all of the little edges. Now you can do that before you glue them down, but I always find it easier just to do it while they are glued down. After that, you guessed it, to give it that rustic look, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and my favorite distressing brush and I dry brushed that all over my sign. I then took my sanding block and sanded it down to help make it all blend in. After that, I took this super cute gnome little stake that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I went ahead and, well, I tried to get off the stick. At first, I used my wire cutters, and that did not work, and then I realized that if I just bent it back and forth several times, eventually it did break off. So I think that was the trick, is just kind of loosening it by bending it. So after I finally got it off the stick, I took my Waverly Antique Wax and I brushed over the gnome with that to give it more of that rustic look. Next, to help glue this down, I took 2 tumbling tower blocks and I painted just the edges and the sides with the white chalk paint. I'm not sure if this was necessary, but I thought maybe you could see it. I don't know if you actually could. And then I hot glued one at the top and one at the bottom. Next, I added some hot glue to each one of those tumbling tower blocks, flipped my gnome over, and hot glued him to the middle of my sign. Now you can use this as just a regular standing sign, like a little shelf sitter, but I decided to take some nautical rope and add a hanger to the back. So in order to make it easier to glue down, I just kind of frayed the ends. I kind of unbraided it, and then I put a generous amount of hot glue on either side and glued them down. Then to give it extra support, I went ahead and put duct tape over the ends of the nautical rope. Now, I loved how this turned out, but I just felt like it needed something else. So what I did was I took these thumbtacks that I got in a pack from the Dollar Tree, and they were originally silver, and I just pushed one in every corner. Then to make it look a little bronzy or darker and kind of blend in with the antique look, I just took that Waverly Antique Wax and brushed right over it. I think by doing this, it added such a great little touch and a lot of detail. And just this little idea just added so much and really brought the whole thing together. I loved how this little gnome sign came out. It really was super easy to create, and it only really took a few items from your craft stash and from the Dollar Tree. And by the way, I am loving the decor that the Dollar Tree is putting out for 4th of July. I just think it is all super cute. So after I had all my tacks down, that completed this sign, and I loved how this came out. Oh, I forgot to mention that it was easier to go in with a makeup sponge to go ahead and brush over that with the Waverly wax. But after that was done, then this sign was complete and ready to use for the 4th of July, and he is just super cute. What do you think? Like I said, I loved how all of these DIYs came out. I absolutely am in love with this little red truck, this Patriotic truck. I think that it is so cute, and it has like equal parts cuteness but equal parts rustic, and I think that that just ties it all together. And I don't mind a little glitter for 4th of July. I think it's a fun holiday, and it just is really cute. So you're going to have to let me know in the comments which one was your favorite DIY. And if you ever recreate any of these, please join our Facebook group, the Crafts with Ash DIY and Decor Community Group, because that way you can post your creations. I want to thank Theresa B DIY for hosting this wonderful open challenge for a great cause, and Unicorn Dust Designs for co-hosting. I had so much fun coming up with all of these and creating these, and I am excited to share more patriotic decor with you very soon. If you haven't done so already, I want to remind you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to hit that little notification bell so you can get notified anytime I upload a DIY. I have a lot of content coming up, and I would not want you to miss a thing. Until I see you again, I will craft with you soon. Bye!